Here on this DeBacco University video, I'm going to go over regulating humidity in a cannabis grow facility. All right, let's go over some of the complexities and understand a little bit better regulating humidity in a cannabis grow facility. All right, so humidity. What is humidity? Well, humidity is the measure of water vapor in the air. Many growers think it's unavoidable, and while this is true to some extent, if humidity goes unregulated, the plants could become more likely to get powdery mildew or bud rot if levels are too high. They could also suffer from leaf burn or water stress if the levels become too low. So what's the optimum humidity? Well, it's going to actually depend on the stage of growth of your plant. The clones and vegetative are typically higher levels of humidity, and as the plant ages into flowering and final weeks of flowering, the humidity level or ideal humidity levels begins to decrease there for a cannabis plant. Now, to control humidity, you need control over the environment. So to gain better control over the growing environment, growers need to isolate their grow rooms. But air circulation is also still important. So you want to create this kind of sealed up bubble. You want to have a way of regulating this and a way to kind of monitor the airflow as well. Sealing off and insulating the grow area is one way to get isolation from the outside environment, but it's important regardless of the outside conditions to make sure you are still having air movement within the facility. Temperature regulation also impacts humidity. So when we're talking about humidity, that's important. We also want to look at how humidity and air temp kind of play off one another. Temperature regulation is important for the plants in general, but how this is accomplished can impact the humidity levels. For air conditioning units, make sure the unit is sized appropriately to reduce the chance of large temperature swings from a unit that is either too large or too small for the growing area. The goal is to have your unit run for consistent cycles for longer durations to moderate the temperature changes. You don't want it to get too hot, then get too cold, then get too hot, then get too cold. You want to kind of keep it at an even keel there. Avoid short on and off cycles, which will reduce the life expectancy of your air conditioning unit and is also not beneficial to the plants. So now you're going to wear your unit out quicker, but you're also not going to benefit the plants in any way. And here we're seeing when we take our air temperature and decrease our air temperature, going from 28 degrees Celsius to 24, just that change in temperature can also impact the humidity. And we see our relative humidity acceptable range here changing with the temperatures. Now that temperature and humidity, we're looking at the vapor pressure deficit here. Temperature and humidity are inversely proportional. When the temperature goes down, the humidity is on the increase. This is why swings in temperature impact humidity as well, which will relate to potential disease pressures. So the goal for your facility should be consistency, monitoring your levels, and knowing what levels are your target levels so you can be aware that you are within that acceptable range. As I said, the importance of air circulation. So oscillating fans are a good start, but a room with a dense canopy, floor fans may also be needed. The goal is to maintain consistency across all portions of a fully grown plant. We just want to have good air circulation at the bottom or good air circulation at the top. We want to make sure we're mixing that air in a vertical sense as well as in a horizontal sense because air circulation is still important at all stages of plant development. If you are using water tanks, you want to make sure that they are being covered. You also want to be checking your water drains because to limit the amount of water that may naturally enter a grow space, to be sure to cover any water reservoirs you may have. You don't want to have this artificially increasing level of humidity. Also make sure that the drains are actually draining excess water. It's not just a large puddle on the floor. Make sure that water is getting to that drain and going actually down the drain. Both of these may seem obvious, but are still worth mentioning and always worth that double check to ensure that your reservoirs, if you have any, are sealed and your drains are draining properly. For additional help, you might want to use a dehumidifier. So dehumidifiers remove moisture from the air. These units may be needed more during the mid to late portions of the growing season because the increase in plant matter that you should have in your growing facility. Make sure that it is a commercial grade, not a residential homeowner grade dehumidifier. Residential models, while cheaper, are also electrically inefficient and do not hold up under the workload of a grow room with a lot of transpiration occurring with your plants. A proper dehumidifier will save you money in the long run, though proper humidity control and as a result to reduce potential loss from disease. So really it's important if you need a dehumidifier, you get a commercial one set or sized for your facility because it can really save you a lot in the long run. So where does this humidity come from? I talked about from the plants. Well, plants transpire about 97% of the water they absorb. So 90% of the water comes up and out the stomata of the leaves. Growers are suggested to have multiple units to properly regulate the humidity. You want to just have one big unit in the corner. You want to have multiple units to ensure that there's an even distribution or control over the humidity in a growing room. Multiple units offer that more even control over a larger space and also redundancy. If one unit was to fail, the entire grow space does not fail with it. You have that kind of backup in systems. Yes, others might be a little overworked, but at least you won't lose the entire crop. So if you're in the opposite situation where you want to increase the humidity levels, you want to use a humidifier. And these can produce a constant flow of water vapor for an indoor garden, which may be needed if natural air is especially dry. This could be particularly to your region. This is because if you're using heaters that could naturally dry out the air. Cool water is used to create a mist that dissipates throughout the space and increases those moisture levels, again, to bring them up to your desired target levels. Lastly, avoid competing systems. So getting both a temperature and humidity in balance can be a difficult task. However, knowing the natural conditions of your outside air may help you want to adjust your light cycles to be during the natural night of the day to reduce the heat of the lights compounding with the heat of the day. So if you're growing in a completely indoor space, those plants are isolated from the outside, just because the sun's out doesn't mean your lights have to be on. You can help kind of absorb some of that heat, some of those differences by having your plants essentially experiencing the daytime during what would be the natural nighttime when it's cooler out. So these are different ways that growers can manipulate completely controlled indoor situations to try to reduce the stress on the equipment and systems, to try to maintain the target humidity as well as temperature levels in their grow space to help maximize plant production.